One of the witnesses who took the stand for Jackson's defense, who swore under oath that Michael Jackson never touched him, is right now in the year of our Lord 2026 preparing to walk into a different courtroom and swear the exact opposite in front of a new jury.
In February 2003, the most famous man on the planet sits on camera next to a 13-year-old cancer survivor named Gavin Arvizo, holding his hand and telling a British journalist that children sleep in his bed. He doesn't see anything wrong with that.
Why can't you share your bed? The most loving thing to do is to share your bed with someone. You know?
You really think that?
Yeah.
That one sentence is the match. The raid, the arrest, the 6-month trial, the 14 not guilty verdicts, 21 years of argument, all of it starts there. And Michael Jackson said it on purpose. In an interview, he set up himself thinking he would fix his image. Netflix just dropped 3 hours about how that spectacularly backfired. We watched it, but we also read the parts that they left out.
I'm Nikita.
And I'm Tyrella.
And welcome to This Feels Criminal. This week, we are covering the Michael Jackson, The Verdict documentary that is on Netflix right now. We are going to just kind of talk about the documentary itself pretty high level and what they left out and what is currently going on with Michael Jackson's estate today. And as a quick reminder, if you are a patron, part 2 is ready for you right now. You don't even have to wait for it. But if you're not a patron, that is okay because we will be back with you on Thursday for part 2.
Yes.
So let's talk about the why now, right? Because why are we talking about Michael Jackson right now? What is going on right now that brought this back up? It seemed very random to me when I saw a documentary pop up in like the top 10 new releases on Netflix or whatever. Let's just clear that right now. It came out June 3rd, 2026. It's a 3-part docuseries, as we discussed, directed by Nick Green, and it revisits the 2005 criminal trial, where Jackson was acquitted on 14 counts of child sexual abuse. And it came out weeks after the biopic Michael dropped, and that grossed over $150 million at the box office, which again, wild.
Did you say 150 or 850?
850.
Okay. Yes.
I thought I said 850. 850. It's a lot of dollars, y'all.
That's a lot of dollars.
I know. Critics of that film, though, say that the film itself kind of sidestepped all of the abuse allegations and just really kind of ignored that part of his life. I haven't seen it. I don't know.
I haven't seen it either. If it's made by people just talking about his music career, then I get that. If somebody wants to make it, they can make it how they want to make it. I don't know.
Yeah. Everything is biased. And as we go through this doc, you will see some bias there as well. So the biopic has just come out. We're also just weeks away at this point from the 21st anniversary of the June 13th, 2005 acquittal. So everything's kind of coming together at once, right? There's this movie that's doing incredibly well that is removing the allegations entirely. And then there is Netflix that is focusing on the allegations only. So that's kind of where we are. And then we will find out that there are some other allegations that are being raised now against Michael's estate that are current and ongoing as well. So let's just jump on in. What do you say?
Yeah. And before we start, when you started this video, were you in the camp of like listeners or viewers? Were you in the camp of he obviously did this and you can't move me in that? Is it he obviously is innocent and was always innocent? I'd just love to know. Drop it in the comments below or comments on Spotify. Just wondering. And then we'll ask you that again at the end because I just wonder, like, there's a lot that
change.
Yeah, there's a lot that I didn't know.
There's so much that I didn't know. Like, I remember him being arrested, criminally charged. I remember him being acquitted. I knew it had to do with child sexual abuse allegations, but I didn't watch it. I didn't really know the ins and outs of it. And I didn't ever really have a strong opinion, I guess, one way or the other.
Yeah.
I have always thought he is a strange bird. But I think a lot of that goes back to the life that he grew up in, and I never really thought more about it past that. So this was a very interesting documentary to watch, especially because it leans so heavily towards him being guilty.
Right. Yeah. And it's worth noting the setup of the documentary, who are our talking heads in it, all of these things.
Yeah.
So, like we said, 3 episodes, and it's told by people who were part of things as they happened. So, our main storytellers are the prosecutor for the criminal case, Ron Zonin, investigative reporter Diane Diamond. She was like all over this. I think this is kind of what made her career, honestly.
Yeah.
The Jackson family attorney, Brian Oxman, and biographer J. Randy Taraborelli. He was like apparently very good friends with Michael Jackson growing up, and then he became his biographer and things like that. We do also talk to the head of Michael Jackson's security at the time, Carrie Anderson, and 2 jurors who sat on the case, and then Martin Bashir, who we will talk about more, but he is the British journalist who kind of unleashed all of this. There are differing opinions of this documentary. The Daily Beast titled it, quote, "A devastating blow to the King of Pop's legacy." And the statement says, quote, "The series aims to strip away the softening of Jackson's public image by laying bare the raw and disturbing details of the prosecution's case and the trial's evidence." But some of the most criticism that we're seeing is not that it's necessarily biased in one way or the other, although it is biased toward the prosecution side.
100%, yeah.
It is that it is very thin. So it's 3 episodes of information that doesn't really seem to add anything that isn't already on public record.
Yeah. Yeah. Other than you get to hear like the candid perspective of people who were there, which obviously like as the trial's going on and immediately after, like you don't really get that. We hear a lot from Diane, who was the reporter. In her role as a reporter, she's not really allowed to give her very personal opinion about, you know, what things were said and how that made her feel and like all that kind of stuff. That's really all we get out of this doc. Although I did love the one lady that they interviewed. I don't think she was a juror. I think she was the girl that was just like in the crowd and she like passed out.
Yeah. She quit her job just to go to the trial. Literally quit her job and moved to just sit in on the trial.
Yes. When she said that, I was like, people are wild. There's no one on this planet that I love and admire enough to follow them all over the place, except for like my husband and my children.
Yeah. Like,
that's crazy. That man doesn't even know you.
That man doesn't know you, and you don't know that man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, but she did. She gave her all. She gave her all for this trial. But even after watching 3 episodes, and again, I didn't really follow the case at the time. Like, I was just like, okay, you know, I had heard about it. It was in the news and all that kind of stuff, but I wasn't like honed in on it. Yeah. I still had to Google a bunch of stuff and read a bunch of articles and find transcripts because there was just like things that they would say in the documentary. And I'm like, well, wait a second. Can we follow up on that? Or did that really happen? Or is this just somebody saying that? And there's no actual proof of it. Was that part of the trial? Was it not part of the trial? There was just a lot of stuff that I was like, I still don't 100% exactly understand what happened.
Yeah, same. So episode 1 of this docuseries is all about the Bashir tape and the raid itself. That interview aired February of 2003, and the public reaction to it was immediately like, everyone was like, holy shit, are you kidding me? Did not like it, did not feel good about it. And it's in this interview, which Jackson asks to do. He requests Bashir to come interview him specifically because Michael was obsessed with Princess Diana, which, I mean, honestly, same. The People's Princess will live on forever in my heart. I did a book report about her in 4th grade, and I got to dress up with her. It was fantastic. Anyway, not the point. I digress. So Michael's like, I want to do this interview with him. He interviewed her. She was like someone he really looked up to, whatever. I don't remember who it was in the doc, but they say like, obviously Michael did not understand how that interview went for Diana, because in that interview is where they say, because it was post-divorce, right?
Yeah.
That is what really turned the royal family against her was that interview, because Bashir asked Diana specifically about Camilla and all of this kind of stuff. And that's where she makes statements about their marriage, whatever.
Which are totally true.
Totally true.
And the royal family knew that. They didn't like Camilla and tried to keep them apart anyway. But like her being like, he was like, do you think that she had something to do with your divorce or your marriage ending? And she's like, well, there were 3 of us in the marriage and that's pretty crowded.
Yeah, exactly. And what they're trying to point out, though, is that Michael did not understand the impact that interview had, and he did not understand that that is the style of interview that Bashir did, and that he needed to be cautious doing this. I don't think his team probably thought this was a good idea, but again, I don't think anybody tells Michael Jackson no. So,
well, and actually, I've gone down so many rabbit holes, but actually, Maury Povich did another documentary called The Tapes They Don't Want You to See or something like that. It is like living with Michael Jackson, what they didn't want you to see or whatever.
Oh,
and Michael Jackson, his team actually had another camera set up for every interview he did with Martin Bashir. They recorded a backup copy of their own.
I love that.
So that they had the full context. Bashir's team says they didn't know about it. It's clear as fucking day. It's like their camera is here, his camera is here. His videographer can be seen going and doing stuff.
There's so many people in the room. It's not like it was just him and Bashir in there.
Yeah, it wasn't like a camera in somebody's pocket or something that nobody knew about. It was a physical fucking setup camera. So there's no way they didn't know about it. But anyway, they had their own copy. So
That's smart.
so I think his team was very cautious about this because I don't think they trusted him. I still don't understand the full context of how the sentiment online appears to be like Martin Bashir completely gained Diana's trust and then betrayed her with the way that he edited this. I can see where people are getting that from Michael Jackson. I just don't know enough about the rest of the Diana thing. But basically they were like, you should not trust him because this is how his claim to fame. He gets close to people and then he spends it for the views or whatever.
Yeah.
He's not trustworthy.
Well, obviously Michael was not aware. So he sits to camera. This is the interview where he talks about children sleeping in his bed, and he defends it as saying that it's actually loving. It's the most loving thing you can do is share your bed with someone, and people are sexualizing that, and it's not sexual at all. It's all about just love and caring. It's bizarre at best. He also says in this interview that when kids would visit him, that they always want to stay with him and that they never stay in the guest rooms, and that they ask specifically to stay with him. And he says, if it's okay with your parents. But anyway, we'll just let you hear a clip of it.
There was one night I stood in there, I asked him if I could stay in the bedroom. Hey, let me stay in the bedroom. And I was like, Michael, you can sleep on the bed. And he was like, no, you sleep on the bed, sleep on the bed. We're like, no, you sleep on the bed. And then he finally said, okay, if you love me, you sleep on the bed. I was like, oh, man. And so I finally slept on the bed. But it was fun that night. I slept on the floor. I wasn't sleeping back. No, he packed the whole mess of blankets on the floor.
What? But Michael, you're a 44-year-old man now. What do you get out of this? What do you get out of this?
He's 4. Yeah, I'm 4. I love... I think what they get from me, I get from them. I've said it many times, my greatest inspiration comes from kids. Every song I write, every dance I do, all the poetry I write, is all inspired from that level of innocence, that consciousness of purity. And children have that. I see God in the face of children. And, I just love being around that all the time.
When people hear that children from other families have come and they've stayed in your house, they've stayed in your bedroom.
Very few.
But, some have. And they say, is that really appropriate for a grown man to be doing that? How do you respond to that?
I feel sorry for them because that's judging someone who wants to really help people. Why can't you share your bed? The most loving thing to do is to share your bed with someone. You
really think that?
Yeah, of course.
You're taking the position that you use every single night that you go into. You sleep, and you're sharing it with another.
You say, you can have my bed if you want. Sleep in it. I'll sleep on the floor. It's yours. Always give the best to the company, Like to him, I said, because he was going to sleep on the floor. I said, no, you sleep in the bed. I'll sleep on the
But
floor.
haven't you got a spare room or a spare house here where you could have stayed?
Yeah, but no, yes, we have guest units, but whenever kids come here, they always want to stay with me. They never want to stay in the guest. And I have never invited them in my room. They always just want to stay. They say, can I stay with you tonight? I go, if it's okay with your parents, yes, you can.
Okay, so he goes further and confirms his feelings on this topic, as he's talking to Bashir again for another interview. And that interview is also part of Living with Michael Jackson. We'll play you a clip of that really quick.
And so it was that we came back to our meeting at Neverland with 12-year-old Gavin. I found this easily the most disturbing moment of the past 8 months. When you're talking about children, we met Gavin. And it was a great privilege to meet Gavin because he's had a lot of suffering in his life.
Yeah.
When Gavin was there, he talked about the fact that he shares your bedroom.
Yes.
Can you understand why people would worry about that?
Because they're ignorant.
But is it really appropriate for a 44-year-old man to share a bedroom with a child who is not related to him at all?
That's a beautiful thing.
That's not a worrying thing?
Why should they be worrying? Who's the criminal? Who's Jack the Ripper in the room? This is a guy trying to help heal a child. I'm sleeping on a sleeping bag on the floor. I gave him the bed because he has a brother named Star. So him and Star took the bed, and I'm on the floor on the sleeping bag.
Did you ever sleep in the bed with them?
No. But I have slept in bed with many children. I sleep in bed with all of them. When Macaulay Culkin were little, Kieran Culkin would sleep on this side, Macaulay Culkin's on this side, his sister's in there. We're all just jamming the bed. Then we wake up like dawn and go in the hot air balloon. Yeah, we have the footage. I have all the footage.
Is that right, Michael?
It's very right. It's very loving. That's what the world needs now. More love. More.
The world needs
more heart.
the world needs a man who's 44 sleeping
No,
in
you're
bed
making
with
it.
children.
No, you're making it all wrong.
Well, tell me, help me.
Because what's wrong with sharing a love? You don't sleep with your kids or some other kid who needs love, who didn't have a good
No,
childhood?
I don't. I would never dream of
I
sleeping.
would.
I would never
Because
dream.
you've never been where I've been mentally.
What do you think people would say if I said, well, I've invited some of my daughter's friends round or my son's friends round and they're going to sleep in the bed with me tonight?
That's fine.
What do you think their parents would say?
If they're wacky, they would say you can't. But if you're a close family, like your family, you know them well, and
Michael, I wouldn't like my children to sleep in anybody else's bed.
well, I wouldn't mind if I knew the person well, and I'm very close to Barry Gibb. Paris and Prince can stay with him anytime. My children sleep with other people all the time.
And you're happy with that?
I'm fine with it. They're honest. They're sweet people. They're not Jack the Ripper. God knows in my heart how much I adore children.
But isn't that precisely the problem? That when you actually invite children into your bed, you never know what's going to happen.
When you say bed, you're thinking sexual. They make that sexual. It's not sexual. But we're going to sleep. I tuck them in. I put a little music on, and do a little story time. I read a book. It's very sweet. Put the fireplace on. Give them hot milk. We have little cookies. It's very charming. Very sweet. Sure. It's what the whole world should do.
And he kind of doubles down again after his arrest in December of 2003. In a CBS interview, he's asked if it was still acceptable to sleep with children. And he says, well, what's wrong with sharing your bed? I didn't say I slept in the bed. Even if I did sleep in the bed, it's okay. I'm not going to do anything sexual to a child. It's not where my heart is. I would never do anything like that. That's not Michael Jackson. I'm sorry. That's someone else. Again, not a good look. Also, not a good look that you keep doubling down.
I know it's not a good look. And even in the Bashir thing where he's like, I mean, don't you sleep with your kids? It's like, yeah, sure. I let my kids sleep in the bed with me. I mean, not a lot, but sure, I would be fine with that. But then
if
he's
they
like,
wake up in the middle of the night and they come downstairs,
yeah. Okay, fine. But he's not saying I sleep with my own children in my bed. He's saying lots and lots of other children. So then he follows that up with, well, or wouldn't you just, let other kids sleep in your bed with you if they need love? And Martin Bashir is like, no. Absolutely not. And it's just not something I think a lot of the public can understand.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, Michael even says, he's like, well, sometimes I did sleep on the floor while they slept in the bed, but sometimes I did sleep in the bed. And it was just like, I know his PR team was like, please stop talking. Please stop talking.
I know. Well, and okay. So at one point he says that he's really good friends with Barry Gibb, which my mother would have passed out, vomited in her own, passed out in her own vomit. My mom was obsessed with Barry Gibb, but they were really good friends. And he's like, I'm fine if my kids sleep in the bed with him, if they go to a sleepover or whatever. And I'm like, okay, let me try and think through this logic. So, when my kids go sleep over at their grandparents' house when they were little and they were scared, they'd share a bed with them. Yes, I am comfortable with that. However, if they're just going to a friend's house for a sleepover and I find out that the dad slept in the bed with them, I would not be okay with that.
Yeah.
However,
or even the mom, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, that's weird. However, Barry Gibb apparently is somebody who he considers family. So, okay, if this is an uncle figure, I know different families do different stuff. So when you're positioning it that way, I'm like, okay, let me try to see the nuance in it. But overall,
I'm struggling.
I'm really struggling. And then when we get to all of the rules supposedly around how the kids were allowed to sleep with him and who was allowed to be in there, it don't look good.
It don't look good. And I mean, maybe they edited a lot of this and maybe there is more context that they just don't show us. We will.
Well, yeah.
Who can know?
And to be fair, in the documentary, so the clips that we just played you are significantly longer than what they included in the documentary. What they included in the documentary were very small clips. They cut out a lot of it.
Yeah.
I included intentionally a lot more information. Now, does that a lot more information help? For some people, I don't think it
Yeah.
does. But I did want to include more. So what we included is substantially more
Yes.
than what was in the Netflix doc, and then I think even what actually aired in Martin Bashir's thing
Yeah.
at the time.
So, I mean, genuine question. Like, a grown man saying on camera he shares his bed with other people's kids. Does that make him guilty of something? Or is this just like a very bad judgment call? Like, how do you guys that are listening, watching, whatever, how do you feel about it? Like, at this point, you hear this man say this. What does that do to your brain? Is your brain like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense, then I get it? Or are you like, absolutely not?
Right.
Just let us know.
Let us know.
So then, as a result of this documentary, right, on November 18th, 2003, approximately 70 sheriff's deputies raid Neverland. That's a lot of sheriff's deputies.
Mhm.
Although I will say it was 300 acres? Is that what they said?
Yeah, it's
Of property.
It's a
wild. And it's a
large-
carnival and there's a house. Like, it's wild. It's
Yeah.
wild.
And they have guest units that are not part of the main house. Yeah, it's big.
It's a lot. An arrest warrant is issued, and Jackson does ultimately surrender to the Santa Barbara authorities. And episode 1 ends with his ex-associate Vincent Amon telling people a story about Frank Cascio giving him a nude magazine that Michael Jackson has allegedly marked up. And Amon said, I defended him and I wholeheartedly believed in his innocence until I didn't. And so it's like a very ominous cliffhanger type thing, right? And according to Amon, Frank Tyson, who is Frank Cascio, grew up around Michael, worked for him, rose through the ranks. He defends him against every allegation that's coming out against him and swears that he would never abuse children. That's not who Michael is. That's not the Michael I know. And then cleared his home of anything he had ever gotten from Neverland, fearing that his home would now be raided. So, like, he's got all of this stuff, this memorabilia from Michael, and now he's all of a sudden getting rid of it. That's kind of weird, right?
Mhm.
And he gives all of this stuff to Amon
To, I guess, get rid of.
To get rid of for
Yeah.
him, I guess. And so then Amon's like, I feel like I need to go through this because, like, it's weird. Why are you getting rid of stuff? You're so adamant, you're defending him, whatever. Well, he goes through it, and this is where he finds this magazine, which is a pornographic magazine. And he says there were Sharpie circles around the video ordering section. And clearly someone wanted these videos and they circled the ones that they wanted. And the videos, which are of children that are naked, some are with their families, some are just naked kids. Like, that's concerning.
Mhm.
Again, we don't know who circled it. We don't know when it was circled. We don't know why. Either way, regardless, it's alarming. And according to the footage that you see, some of the videos were titled Nudist Youth Weekend and Euro Nudist Family. Amon says he confronts Tyson about this, about the magazine, and Tyson's like, it was just a phase that Michael and I went through. Again, don't love that. A phase? No, that's not a phase.
That's not a phase.
Child pornography is not a phase.
Why are these even being made? What is the context that something like this is being made that is not sexual? I feel like I
Exactly.
just don't understand. Why would you need
Well, and
videos of children?
My other question too is, like, it's in a magazine. So, like, you're not even, like, it's not, you didn't have to go to the dark web to get it. Like, I don't order a lot of nudie magazines. Okay. So I don't know. I don't know where you get them. I don't know how you subscribe. I don't know how I got this one. But
Yeah,
this
where-
was
yeah.
like just clearly printed in there. It wasn't secretive. You didn't
Mhm.
get it in a black envelope that had to be signed for. It was just there. And
Yeah.
you could just order it.
Yeah. And Vincent, like, when he opened the bag that Frank gave him, he records this on video.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he pulls out. Now, here's what I couldn't find. Did that become part of the court record? Did we?
No idea.
Do we have these anywhere? Like, or is this just?
Yeah.
I don't know. But there is video of it, so I don't know.
Who knows?
So the trial starts in Santa Barbara County,
Mm.
Santa Barbara County, California, on January 31st, 2005. It lasted close to 6 months. It was a long
Crazy.
trial. My God. Martin Bashir was the prosecution's first witness. which you're like, okay, yeah, he was there. He interviewed Michael over 8 months. It was a span of time that he continued to come back to Neverland, continue to interview him. So obviously the prosecution, and it was his documentary that exposed the bizarre nature of Michael Jackson's relationship with children, although it had been questioned before.
Yeah.
But him actually admitting, yes, I sleep with children in the bed, came from this documentary. So they wanted to ask him questions about, you know, is there anything that he said off camera, or just like, what else do you know?
Yeah.
The weird thing about Martin Bashir is he did not want to be there, and he fought the subpoena under California's journalist shield law. He was just like, use the documentary. I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
He didn't want to reveal any of his like work product. He didn't want to reveal his sources, which, like, okay, they were trying to get stuff that maybe had ended up on the cutting room floor that didn't come out in the full documentary. On the stand, this I thought was crazy. Anything that was asked of him, almost, he declined to answer. He was just like, thank you, but no.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, can't he get in trouble for that? Like, isn't he supposed to answer the questions? He was very low in his answers. Apparently, Michael Jackson like gestured to him to like raise your voice like nobody could hear you. He was almost held in contempt of court for his behavior. But I mean, fucking, he committed to the bit. He was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not answering these questions. And he kind of got away with it. So like,
yeah,
he's their first witness. He was supposed to be one of their biggest witnesses because, again, he even says in his own documentary that he found Michael's relationship with the children on the ranch disturbing, that the answers that he got from Michael Jackson were disturbing. The behavior between them was just like, that's how he characterized it, was very, very disturbing. And then he gets on the stand and he's just like, I'm simply not going to answer any questions, which was, they literally got nothing out of him.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, Martin Bashir made a statement the day that Michael Jackson died, because he's a news correspondent or whatever. I think he worked for ABC at the time. So he gets on at his news desk or whatever, and he makes a statement about Michael Jackson's death and just how saddened he is to hear the news and all that stuff. But I'm going to play the clip because, and it's really short, but I think it's also important because, remember, his documentary spun the whole thing as like, there's something wrong here. He's doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But then in his statement after he died, he's like, I never saw anything untoward, so I don't know. I mean, I think he was just a great guy. The whole thing contradicts itself completely, and it's like, then why didn't you say any of that shit on the stand? But let's hear the clip.
I think all of us were shocked and deeply saddened by the news today. I was actually out running in Central Park when I heard, and came home, showered, and came into the office. Many of us were excited about the prospect of him performing in London. Thousands of people had bought tickets from all over the world. And now to hear this news is very, very sad. I think it's worth remembering that he was probably singly the greatest dancer and musician the world has ever seen. Certainly when I made the documentary, there was a small part of that which contained a controversy concerning his relationship with other young people. But the truth is that he was never convicted of any crime. I never saw any wrongdoing myself. And whilst his lifestyle may have been a bit unorthodox, I don't believe it was criminal. And I think the world has now lost the greatest entertainer it's probably ever known.
Just weird stuff.
It's weird stuff. And like, I know we'll talk about this as we go through the actual trial part of it, but he's the first of many, if not every witness, I feel like, to completely break down on the prosecution side. And so for that reason, I have conflicted feelings about it, because I don't know if that means he did do it, or if that means, do you know what I mean? Was there something at play that all of these witnesses turn? But I don't know. We'll go through it. You can let us know what you think.
Yeah.
So a key piece of evidence for the prosecution is the fact that Michael and Gavin's fingerprints are discovered on top of these hustler, barely legal, hardcore porn magazines, right?
Yeah.
And a detective testified that they were among 19 identified latent prints found on the porn collection. And prosecutors claim that the fact that both Jackson's prints and those of the alleged victims were on the same publication indicated that he showed them to his alleged victims in order to groom them into sexual abuse. They say essentially that he started by showing them girls, right?
Young.
Things that they would be into, young girls, things to see, to make it okay. And that was how he like got them comfortable, essentially, is what they're saying. I thought this was flimsy at best because you're like, well, your fingerprints are on it, therefore you must have been the one to show it to them. And I'm like, they could have picked it up at separate times. Listen, the fact that the magazines were there, it's concerning, that all on its own, but your allegation, you're using this to support the fact that he must have been the one to show them. I just don't think that holds up.
Right.
Personally.
Yeah.
It's still gross. It's still icky. I don't like it. But I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't buy that.
Yeah.
The Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department forensic expert Robert Spinner says that 12 of the 19 identified prints belonged to Jackson, 5 belonged to Gavin, and 2 were those of his brother Star. The right middle fingerprint of Gavin had also been found on other adult magazines, including a 1993 copy, Visions of Fantasy.
Okay.
Never heard of her. The magazine with the boys' prints came from a briefcase found in the bathroom of Jackson's master bedroom. And they find it because Gavin tells the police there's a black suitcase in this room, blah, blah, blah. It's full of porn, whatever.
Yeah, and this is what's inside it.
This is what's inside it. And so it matched the description and it was where he said it would be. So it seems he has some credibility. He knows about it, obviously, right? On cross, though, the defense establishes the specific issue that Starr identified post-dated the period of time that he claimed that the abuse was going on, right? And they have several seized magazines that carry publication dates that are after the family has left Neverland Ranch. Again, I was like, oh, damn it, I don't like this, but
on one hand, it's like that on the stand, that can be a gotcha moment, and it absolutely was for the jury for sure. I don't necessarily fault a child for being like, yeah, that looks like the one that he showed me, and then them being like, well, this one was produced in August of '93, and you weren't even there, or whatever year, and you weren't even there anymore at that point. And then he's like, oh, okay. I mean, I'm like,
but that also doesn't mean he didn't come back at some point. His fingerprints were on it, so obviously at some point it was seen. Like,
yeah, his fingerprints were on some. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just, if you've been shown, if you've seen a lot of these magazines, look, their boobs are boobs. I don't know. I just like, okay, yeah, that looks about like it was a skinny girl with boobs. Like, okay, I'm not sure that that is the gotcha. It's like, well, you said this was a specific one that you saw.
Yeah.
How are you going to remember exactly what the cover looked like when I'm sure they're all relatively the fucking same?
Right. I will say, to the defense's credit, they cast a lot of reasonable doubt.
They really did. They
were scattering that shit everywhere.
But that's not the only thing that they have against these fingerprints. So it's not just, or even these magazines, it's not just that Starr misidentified the one he thought for sure he had seen, which obviously still carried weight.
Yeah.
But they had issues with the fingerprints too.
Yeah. Some of these magazines weren't fingerprinted until months after they were seized. And they had already been handled during grand jury hearings prior to fingerprinting as well. So did they touch them during grand jury? Did that, you know what I mean? Like,
which still, the defense is never part of a grand jury. So it's like, it's not like they handed it to Michael and was like, did you, but did they hand it to the, I don't know. Yeah,
I don't know. So CBS reported that the defense's grand jury handling claim had not been resolved at that point. So very concerning. It just seems like there were a lot of things mishandled here.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah.
The court's exhibits supervisor, Alicia Romero, testified she and a colleague handled the items without gloves before being told to use them.
Grow up.
I know.
Why would you not have gloves on?
Yeah. They also talk about how the boys had run of the ranch. Mesro argued that they memorized security codes and they got into Jackson's bedroom when he was away. A 10-year-old cousin, Riho, testified that the boys rummaged through offices and drawers, all kinds of stuff. And so the prints that were on things and their knowledge of the briefcase could have been from them snooping around, not being shown anything. Mesro also suggested that Jackson once caught the boys with the magazines and took them away, which would mean that their fingerprints would have all been on them, but he didn't give it to them. Again, there are a lot of ways apparently that they could have gotten access potentially.
Yeah.
None of it was ever buttoned up.
No, even if you're like, okay, well, they rifled through his shit.
Mm-hmm.
They found his extensive collection of porn that he kept in that bedroom and that bathroom.
Yep.
Okay. I don't like that that's where it's all kept if that's where you are keeping all the kids.
Agreed.
So I do wish that had not happened.
Mm-hmm.
I still think it's certainly not a good look, but.
No. There was no DNA or medical evidence that linked Jackson to any molestation ever found, and the FBI's long investigation found no corroborating physical evidence either. Take that for what it is, physical evidence.
I mean, after the fact, yeah, it's like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In his closing argument, Mesereau said, and the only forensic evidence they had to hang their hat on are fingerprints on some girly magazines that were owned by Michael Jackson. And you know that everywhere the Arvizo children went, they would rummage through drawers, rummage through the house.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That does seem to be corroborated by other witnesses, which we will get to. But anyway, Gavin testified. And he testified that one of his kind of main pillars of his testimony was that Michael Jackson had told him that males have to masturbate and that if they don't, they can get to a level where they might rape a girl or become unstable. He then described the act itself. We're not going to go into detail, but he describes the abuse. However, what came up during his testimony is that in his August 13th, 2003 police interview, Gavin had said the same thing, that he was told that males have to masturbate so that they don't grow up and rape women. You got to do it in an effort to normalize it.
Yeah,
essentially.
I guess.
Which is, by the way, that is normal. I'm not saying that, but like the prosecution is saying
is weird.
Yes, that is weird. And the prosecution is saying that Michael Jackson is telling him this to normalize that, like, it's okay to do that with me and, all this kind of stuff, whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
But in his August 13th, 2003 police interview, he said that his grandmother is the person that told him that.
Mm-hmm.
And so then he gets to trial and he uses the same quote, but attributes it now to Michael Jackson and not his grandmother. And so Mesereau, Michael Jackson's defense attorney, is like, well, who was it? Was it your grandmother or was it Michael Jackson? Were you lying then or are you lying now? Which is never good for a witness on the stand because now you got to pick one. Which time did you lie? And he says they both said it. Both of them said the same thing. That is, I would say, highly unlikely that both of them would say something so
strange and weird.
And that hit his credibility really hard. It is worth noting, I think, that in the Netflix doc, the journalists and the people that were in the courtroom kind of described Tom Mesereau as being very, very explosive towards Gavin, that he was yelling at him. Apparently the judge did actually make comments to both of them, like, don't argue with each other, let him finish the question, let him finish his answer. Apparently it was a very contentious cross, which I don't love because he is still a child who's claiming sexual abuse.
Yeah, I agree.
Could you not?
But they point out in the documentary that when this happened to Gavin, allegedly, he was, 9 or 10? And now when he's on the stand, he's like, 13, 14, 15, something like that. They make a point about him being an angsty teenager now versus the kid
they said
he was.
Yeah, he was prepubescent at the time of his alleged abuse, and now which I mean, okay, but I don't think it's
still
a good
he's
look.
still a child. You're still arguing with a child. That's embarrassing. Don't do that.
Yeah, and then the brothers' testimony contradicted each other on when the magazine incidents happened. So Gavin says it was like a few weeks apart where like it was like one of them was shown in the, whatever.
Yeah.
Starr gave a completely different timeline. The defense used that to argue that the events that they're testifying to are assembled, they're rehearsed, they're not remembered. Again, they were children at the time.
Yeah.
They're still children when they're testifying. I don't take that as a major gotcha. I take that as kids don't fucking know. They don't have the same concept of time that we do. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my kids are convinced that we did something, last year that we did 2 years ago, or last week that was definitely 2 months ago. They don't.
Exactly.
They don't know.
They don't. Yeah. I don't. And if you were to ask a kid Was that a couple days apart, a couple weeks apart, a couple months apart? If it's years
don't
before,
know.
I just don't know. So that
Yeah.
was like, again, not a huge gotcha to me, but it is an inconsistency and the jury had to pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
Ooh.
worth noting,
Mhm.
noting, the day that Gavin testified, and so some people view this as calculation and some people are like, oh, it just sort of happened that way. Apparently, Michael Jackson woke up like, in the middle of the night, very early that morning,
Yeah.
and he's like, oh my God, I'm in immense pain. He had to go to the ER. He was in the ER. His security guard says that they gave him enough drugs to tranquilize an elephant, and Michael Jackson said it still wasn't helping. And obviously, we know that he had
Yeah.
major substance abuse problems, which is what ended up killing him. But every other day of the trial, Michael Jackson was like very put together, very polished. He was wearing a suit, all of these things.
Mhm.
That day, he ended up, because the judge was like, you better get him
Get him here
thee
or I'm
to
holding
the
him
court.
in contempt and revoking
Yeah.
bond. Yeah.
Like, I don't care if he's in the ER. I guess whatever records they gave him, the judge was like, I don't fucking buy this. He needs to
Yeah.
get here. So he was like still in his pajamas because the judge only gave him an hour to get there and they didn't have time to go back to the ranch, which also I was like, Carrie, there's a billion people that can drive his shit from the ranch to the fucking courthouse that he could
Mhm.
change real quick. But okay, anyway.
Yeah.
But he didn't. So he showed up in his pajamas looking disheveled as fuck. He
Yep.
was out of it. He was there. It was a media circus kind of moment.
It
And it
surely
happened to fall on the
was.
day that Gavin was going to testify. Everybody knew that he was going to testify that day.
Mm-hmm. Interesting timing.
Yeah.
For sure. So after the Bashir doc aired, it was released February of 2003. The press swarms the family. Jackson's camp wants to put out a rebuttal video. And in that window of time, the family flies to Miami and they flew on Chris Tucker's private jet. And they stayed at a Calabasas hotel with a possible Brazil trip being floated as an option of like something that they're going to do, right?
Supposedly.
So that people take that as a claim that Jackson conspired to hold the family captive to force a rebuttal video, right? Janet Arvizo, okay, sorry, we're talking about the Arvizo family. He takes them on a trip.
Yes,
to Miami.
because at this point, the documentary airs.
Yeah.
At that point, Gavin isn't alleging anything. Janet's not alleging
Exactly.
anything. It's just people did not like what they saw in the documentary.
Correct.
And according to the prosecution, because they've charged him with, in addition to his sex abuse charges, they've charged him with conspiracy, like kidnapping.
Yeah.
Holding
them hostage, essentially.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And that it was Michael Jackson's team's idea to fly them to Miami where they could watch them and monitor them. And
yeah.
they even have a family friend of the Arvizos, Louise Palanker, talking about how Janet would call her and be like, they're listening to everything. Don't, I don't know what to do. I'm trying to get out of here and stuff like that. And in the court case, the prosecution tried to position this as Michael Jackson was keeping them, isolating them for this reason.
Yeah.
Except that Chris Tucker actually testified. And so we get different information from it.
Yeah. Oopsie. But Janet Arvizo testifies that the family was controlled and monitored and that Jackson intended to send her to a remote part of Brazil where there were no Americans. And there is a rebuttal video out there that exists. And the family says that it was scripted and coerced. And it's all of them sitting there chit-chatting for a minute. Like, you see some behind-the-scenes kind of stuff. And, okay, here's my problem with Janet. I have a lot of problems with all of this. Two things can be true at the same time, right? Here's my problem with Janet. She's like, oh, my God, I'm going to hold his hand during this interview. You guys zoom in on me holding his hand just like they tried to zoom in on Michael holding his hand in the doc. I think it'll be a real moment of, see, this is fine, and adults hold children's hand. Like, she says this on camera.
She's directing the do this, do that. Yeah.
So for her to then turn around and be like, this was scripted and coerced. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm not saying she wasn't like brainwashed and indoctrinated, whatever. But like, it just is very interesting to see that part of it. And then hear her be like, he was going to hold us hostage. I don't know. Former employees of Jackson say that it was not scripted and that the Arvizos were simply recalling their actual experiences at Neverland. I mean, it could go either way. It could be that Janet was unaware of any abuse at the time of the video. It could be that she actually believed what she said at the time. It could be that she was lying or coerced. It's very difficult to know at that point. Their bodyguard, Chris Carter, tells the grand jury that he once found Gavin drunk, and that Gavin said that Michael said, if I can handle it, it's okay, and that the family has to be taken to Brazil, and the boys mainly sleep in Jackson's room. All very concerning things. Chris Tucker does testify that the Miami trip was not Michael Jackson's idea. In his testimony, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the documentary left Chris Tucker completely out of this.
Completely out.
I
Yep.
had no idea that Chris Tucker, when I started reading stuff, I was like, why am I
Why
seeing
are we talking
Chris
about
Tucker?
Chris Tucker?
Like,
What's
I
he
didn't
doing
even know
here?
they were friends. They knew each other. Like,
Yeah.
they
I
knew
know.
each other. And so anyway, yeah, this was not
But I
in
was
the
like, girl,
documentary
you
at
don't
all.
even go here. Why are you here?
I know what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he said that he thought the accuser, who Tucker had befriended in 2000 as the boy was battling cancer, was, quote, smart and cunning. And he told the jurors that the boy would reference his illness whenever he was asking Tucker for money.
And this is Gavin that he's talking
Yeah, we're talking about Gavin.
Because, okay,
And-
so I pulled a lot of this directly from the CNN article that was written directly after the trial. And at that
Yeah.
time, they were
would have
holding
been
back,
minors.
Gavin
Yeah.
and Starr's identity.
He says that, Starr is a key prosecution witness in the trial. He was even more cunning. Chris Tucker says that he felt like that he needed to check his pockets before he left. He was that kind of kid.
Which then lends itself to the rummaging, going through shit
Mm-hmm.
accusations.
It adds credibility to that for sure. Chris Tucker also said that he flew the family by private jet to Miami in February 2003 because Gavin told him that he wanted to go there to be with Michael, which contradicted the assertion by both the family and the prosecution that the trip was part of this effort by Jackson's camp to enlist their help in, putting out this rebuttal video. Chris Tucker says that Gavin called him twice on February 4th, 2003, which was the day after the initial broadcast, Living with Michael Jackson, and that Gavin was shown the program, of him holding hands with Jackson, and that Tucker said that the boy told him that the family wanted to escape the ensuing media onslaught by going to Miami. And, he had learned that's where Jackson was. And so that's where he wanted to go.
Yeah, so Chris Tucker definitely positions this as Gavin called me, said, I want to go where Michael is. I found out he's in Miami. Can you get me there? Like,
can you imagine being 13 and having Chris Tucker and Michael Jackson's phone number? First
oh
of
my
all,
God.
Insane. I would not be able to handle myself. I would lose my phone privileges.
Yeah, and then being like, so, hey, I need to go somewhere. Can you hook me up with your
Exactly.
private jet? Also, I did not know Chris Tucker was like a private jet dude.
I didn't either. I'm going to say something that's going to sound really insensitive, and I don't mean it in an insensitive way because I know they are alleging sexual abuse, and I'm not trying to take away from that at all. But if what Chris Tucker says about Gavin calling him and saying, I want you to take me to Miami because that's where Michael is, that to me gives off such a feeling of a sense of entitlement of like, oh, well, I'll just call this super famous person that I know and have him take me and my whole family to Miami. It's weird.
Yeah, I would say too that the people who do not believe their account of what happened, including like I've seen Tom Mesereau has made statements basically saying that they began to start alleging things
Yeah.
when Michael Jackson began to distance himself from their family. So before all of that, they were going on trips, they were wine and dine, they were getting presents, they were staying at Neverland, they were doing all of these things that they enjoyed, and then all of a sudden, their lifestyle was being stripped away from them.
Yeah.
And then the accusations started coming out. I don't know what's true and what's not,
Yeah.
but that is what some people have
Yeah.
said. And then you have Chris Tucker saying Chris Tucker believed that they were exploiting Gavin's illness to get stuff from famous and rich people.
Yeah.
That was his experience with them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. How do you know? But it's also like, as we'll get into it and talking about other witnesses, the defense is going to point out, which is what they're supposed to do, that every single witness they get up here has an axe to grind of some kind. Everything is a money grab. And it's like, I can believe that to a certain extent, but also, like, how many people are money grabbing? Like, we can't all be money grabbers.
Yes,
That's also concerning to me.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I don't know. But Chris Tucker does say that during this trip to Miami, he warns Jackson about Gavin's family. He said his own associates had also been warning him about the family, but he continued to try to help them because he felt sorry for them. It's laying out this bleeding heart argument, which has been a long-standing argument from the Jackson camp.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he says they got to do a lot of things that I didn't see, and people are telling me to watch out. So, like, I'm trying to warn a friend.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's starting to get weird, right? But Tucker says that he's starting to get nervous. And when Gavin and his brother and sister start referring to him as their brother and telling them, you know, they love him so much, he's part of their family, he's like, ooh, things have gone a little too far for me. We got to step back, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
They say that, you know, Janet would run up shopping receipts and she was out spending money and doing all of these fun things, but then while they're on this trip, but then now she's alleging that she was being held, quote, captive. Now, you can be held captive and still get to go on a shopping spree. Okay. Both things can in fact be true. It just is not a good look though.
No, it's not. That, you know, you're saying that you're held completely captive. Her positioning of it is that she was terrified and all these things. And it's like, look, at that time you couldn't order shit on the internet.
Exactly.
She had to leave where she was staying to physically go shopping.
Exactly.
So, you know, then the position of law enforcement would be, well, then why didn't you go ask for help or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Typically in a different kind of case, you know what I'm saying? I've seen that where people have alleged that they were being held captive for whatever reason. And then the police are like, okay, well, you drove like 15 places that day. Why didn't you stop by the police station? They're like, well, I was too scared to or whatever. But, you know,
again,
she's going
both
shopping.
things can be true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also at this time, remember the bodyguard, his credibility ends up taking a hit because he is arrested in Las Vegas on armed robbery and kidnapping charges before he is scheduled to testify. That's not great. And the jury does end up acquitting on every conspiracy and imprisonment count.
Yeah.
So they didn't buy it.
They did not. And we do have to talk about Janet Arvizo's testimony. It was not good. It did not go good. As we've already said, nobody else's for the prosecution seemed to really go well either.
Nope.
But they brought Janet up, and one of the jurors that sits for the Netflix doc called her Janet from another planet, and she's like, you know, sorry, but that's how I felt about her. She said her testimony was completely erratic. At times it was nonsensical. It seemed to be very inconsistent. Things that she said didn't add up. The jury overall seemed to reject her testimony altogether. And then on cross, her credibility takes another major hit because Janet had earlier sued JCPenney over a parking lot incident. So apparently, what was it? Gavin was caught shoplifting.
I can't remember which one of them.
One of the boys
one
was
of
caught
them is caught
shoplifting.
shoplifting.
And then they're like escorting their family out, I guess. And so Janet says that once they get to the parking lot, she is attacked. She is sexually abused, groped. She says that, I don't know if she used the word beaten, but later she claims all these
Assaulted,
injuries. Yeah, assaulted. But on the day of, they took pictures and in her mugshot, and she had no visible injuries or anything like that. She didn't say anything about it. It wasn't until later that she said something about it. So
Yeah.
she sues JCPenney for all of these things. There are wildly different numbers reported, but the Netflix doc says over $150,000 that she gets from that.
Yeah.
And at the 2005 trial, she admitted lying under oath in that civil case. And she pleaded the fifth on the payments. She later pleaded no contest to welfare fraud. So she was on welfare at the time, and she never reported the income from this settlement to them. And so she had to plead no contest to welfare fraud because she had not disclosed that money. So again, when they start digging into, well, but you didn't make these claims till later, there's pictures of you from that day with no injuries. One of her claims in that was also false imprisonment, which is what she claimed against Michael Jackson. So the defense side of it says, well, this is her MO. She's done exactly this kind of same thing before, and it turned out to not be true then, but she got a settlement. She was doing it for money. There are a lot of people who do not trust the Arvizo's family because of things like that. And I tried to look into other instances because I did see a lot of people claim things, and I couldn't find anything definitive except for the JCPenney thing. So that's where we're going to leave it. Yeah. But there are people who kind of feel that they've done that in different
multiple
avenues.
times. Yeah.
Again, several of the state's own witnesses, including Michael Jackson's ex-wife, Debbie Rowe. So she supposedly, this is a very strange, consenting adults, whatever, but she married him and then gave him the children and then agreed that like once they had the children, she terminated her own parental rights and that she would never have a relationship with him. But then according to the documentary, she was like, I don't think I want to do that anymore. I want to have a relationship with the kids. And so she was going to testify against him and talk about her, according to the prosecution, talk about all her concerns that she had about him with young children and the strange things that she saw. But then she gets on the stand and she says none of that. And she's like, he's a great dad. I have no concerns. Like,
she flipped great. Immediately.
Completely flipped. And they were like, what the fuck?
Yep.
And then the defense actually brought up Macaulay Culkin, Brett Barnes, and Wade Robson. And all three of them testified. These were 3 of the 5 other victims that the prosecution alleged had been abused. But they would not testify for the prosecution. They actually ended up testifying for the defense.
Yeah.
And they all testified under oath that they spent time alone with Michael Jackson, that he never did anything to them. There was never any sexual relationship between them, that was, patently false. Nothing like that has ever happened. Now, Macaulay Culkin has stayed completely consistent in that. I've seen interviews with him very recently because we did a whole series on child stars on our Patreon a while back. And he still to this day says that his relationship with Michael Jackson was completely innocent. He talks about how they really related to each other because Macaulay Culkin was a child star. Michael Jackson had been a child star. They never really got to have a childhood. They were working all the time. And so the only person who really understood his life was Michael Jackson, and kind of like vice versa. Yeah. And so he was like, Michael Jackson kind of never really, it was like almost like an Arrested Development thing where like, it was like he never developed past a certain kind of mental age. I don't know. But he felt that it was very innocent and all of those kind of things. I have also seen people say, again, 2 things can be true. It would, if Michael Jackson was abusing children, Macaulay Culkin wouldn't be the one you would want to abuse because he had star power and significant believing power, essentially. If you're going to be abusing children, you would abuse the ones who, if they came forward. He would have had
nothing to gain financially. Exactly.
Yeah, that if they do come forward, you can just say, well, they just wanted money. And Macaulay Culkin didn't need that. So, I don't know. So it's a lot of things are possible here. It's possible that I believe that Macaulay Culkin was not abused. Again, I don't know about any other children, but I think he could have not been abused, but other kids could have. It just like his story can be completely true. There's just a lot of different ways it could go. And then the other thing that the documentary doesn't disclose, which I thought was shady, is that this family friend of the Arvizos, Louise Palanker, is a talking head, and she's like, this is what Janet was telling me, this is what Gavin was telling me, this is what was going on. It positions her as a completely unrelated third party. I was just friends with the family. That's how I'm connected to this story, as if she has no other ties any other way, except that she is now currently married to the prosecutor on this case, Ron Zonin. They met during the trial, and then they got married years later in 2011. And they reportedly attended Gavin Arvizo's wedding together. So I feel like that just would have been pertinent to disclose, Yeah. I don't know. Because it positions her as like, well, Janet called me and told me this or that. So then that's giving credibility to them. Yeah, they're watching me. I'm being held captive.
Yeah.
But she's married to the prosecutor. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't like that. Okay, well, after 73 days, 140 witnesses, and roughly 700 exhibits, the jury deliberates for about a week. And on June 13th, 2005, Jackson is found not guilty on every count. So that's 14 not guilty verdicts in all. That's crazy. That's crazy. And, this was a huge case anchored to witnesses that the jury just simply did not trust. There was no physical evidence, and reasonable doubt based on that is the correct answer. I don't know if it's the right answer, though. And I don't think we're ever gonna know.
Yeah. It's the legally correct answer.
It is the legally correct answer. So that is the 2005 case. And on that evidence, the acquittal, like we said, it does make sense. But the 2005 trial is not where this story ends, because one of the witnesses who took the stand for Jackson's defense, who swore under oath that Michael Jackson never touched him, is right now, in the year of our Lord 2026, preparing to walk into a different courtroom and swear the exact opposite in front of a new jury. Before we talk about Wade Robson, though, we need to talk about Jordan Chandler. He is a big part of this. There was approximately a $22 to $23 million settlement with Jordan Chandler. He was 13 years old at the time, in a civil action. And there was a civil finding of not guilty. And let's remember that the burden of proof in a civil matter is much lower than that of a criminal matter. These are allegations, again, of child sexual abuse. And many people believe that Michael Jackson paid over $20 million essentially to avoid jail time.
Yeah.
A lot of people viewed this as like a pay to play kind of thing, if you will. Like, well, how much is it going to take for me to make this go away kind of thing.
Yeah, we'll just pay him off.
Yeah, and then we'll all just move on.
And $23 million is Michael Jackson wipes his ass with that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So, according to prosecutors, it was not pursued as a criminal case because Jordan declined to testify. And prosecutors said that obviously we can't proceed without him. And they are basically like, this kid won't take the stand. We've got nothing. We've got no physical evidence. We've got no witness. We've got no corroborating anything at this point. And this kid has taken a settlement. And so we're dead in the water, basically, at this point.
He also did not testify in the 2005 trial. His mom did.
Yes.
And she testified to abuse and things like that, I guess.
Yeah. But the jury did not find her credible either.
And she also testified to the grooming of the parents as well, because for all of the families who say that there was abuse, there was a grooming process for the adults. And it was, according to them, according to their testimony, they said that, you know, again, they're wined and dined. They are given very expensive things. She was given a lot of jewelry, like all of these kind of things. And so it kind of kept her attention elsewhere, while supposedly Michael Jackson was then alone with her son and could do whatever it is that he was going to do. And she was like, oh, okay, well, I'm getting free stuff and just really not paying attention kind of thing.
I did find it interesting. I don't remember which episode it was in, but either way, whenever they talk about her testifying, she talks about how she doesn't have a relationship with her son anymore because he feels like, allegedly, that she was paid off, I guess, if you will, to allow this abuse to happen to him, for what that's worth. So this ties in here, though, because both Wade Robson and James Safechuck, which is such a fun name, were asked for statements around 1993 when this case was going on while they were kids, and they both denied wrongdoing then. And now Wade has something different to say. So Wade met Jackson when he was approximately 5 years old in 1987 after an Australian dance contest. And he alleges abuse from roughly age 7 into his teen years, so approximately 7-ish years. And he frames it as grooming. He says there were constant calls and lavish gifts. He was invited to Neverland. He had private time at hotels and studios. Wade is a choreographer now. He was dancing then, so Michael would pay for him to have studio time to practice and like all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And millennials will know him as Britney Spears' choreographer, NSYNC's choreographer. I immediately knew who Wade Robson was.
Yeah, me too. Because I was like, Wade, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
James met Jackson at the age of 10 on a 1986/1987 Pepsi commercial set. And he alleges abuse from approximately the age of 9 or 10 that went on for several years and included the Neverland train station. I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he describes Jackson as gifting him jewelry and the Thriller jacket, and that they had a mock wedding with a ring. I did not like that at all either.
No.
So they currently have a suit against Michael Jackson, his estate, I guess, if you will, who, let's remember, died in 2009. It is against his companies, so MJJ Productions and MJJ Ventures, alleging that the businesses enabled and concealed the abuse. I am interested to see how they spin that from the company perspective.
Right. Yeah, because there's a lot of legal stuff with that.
Yeah, because you're not suing a person now, you're suing a company.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to prove that the company somehow facilitated this. So it's an interesting legal argument for sure.
Yeah. And I've been watching some legal analysts kind of break it down, and they're like, well, the companies were solely owned by him, so maybe there's some, I don't know. That's going to be interesting. They do both have detailed, specific accounts, a grooming pattern consistent with how child abuse disclosure often works. Because there are a lot of people like, why now? Why now? It's been a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with them not alleging it before and alleging it now. They were children when it happened, if it happened. That's not unheard of. That's fairly common. That's not a red flag by itself. There is also documented lasting fallout. Wade Robson reports that he's had 2 what he calls nervous breakdowns. James Safechuck says insomnia, depression. They've had a lot of mental health, apparently, issues over the years. Mm-hmm. Their attorney, Vince Finaldi, stresses the suits were dismissed. So they were dismissed twice based on statute of limitations and technical grounds, nothing having to do with their credibility. So California amended its statute to let long-delayed childhood abuse claims proceed, which is why the case was able to move forward. So they did appeal the decisions to dismiss the cases. They were initially dismissed because it's like the time had passed. But then California admitted that. They appealed it. They won the appeal. That's why it's going to go move toward trial now. And they've also continued this, even though there's tons of fan backlash. Michael Jackson fans are very, very, very dedicated to his innocence. And when you are going to make a public accusation like this, with that kind of a fan base, like that level of a fan base, he's, again, has been the most famous man on the planet. That is something that it weighs heavily. And there are a lot of people that wouldn't proceed based on that alone. So that, that's something, I guess. However, their credibility becomes muddy. And there are a few different things. The first thing is Wade Robson testified in the 2005 trial completely and totally for Michael Jackson. Remember, he said stuff like, there's no way he did anything like that to me. I never would have stood for that. All of these kind of things. Yeah. James Safechuck also made similar denials to investigators when he was younger. Neither one of them accused Jackson until after Michael Jackson had passed away, and it was a few years after that as well. There was a Cirque du Soleil thing that seems to have maybe kicked this all off. Okay. So there was a show in Vegas. It was a tribute to Michael Jackson. Remember, Wade Robson is a successful choreographer. He danced with Michael a lot. That's where he learned a lot of his stuff, all of these things. So he really wanted that job. He wanted the job to do the show because he's like, I was close friends with them. It should be me. I should be the one to do it. It's a tribute to him. I want to do it. He did not get the job. Apparently, or allegedly, when he learned he was not going to get the job, like he was a steadfast Michael Jackson supporter until he learned he wasn't going to get the job. And then when he learned that, he turned around and filed the suit. Now, Michael Jackson's estate says there's your financial motive. He wanted this job. He had an axe to grind because he didn't get it. And so now he's decided he's going to sue the estate. There's also the issue of Wade Robson's book. Apparently, he was shopping a memoir with publishers about the abuse with literary
Mhm.
agent Alan Nevins in late 2012, early 2013. This is before he filed. He filed in May of 2013. He did not disclose this, and the estate found out that this was happening. And a judge ordered him to produce the drafts of it. So Megyn Kelly talked about this on her show recently. And I believe she had Mark Garagos on her show. But I dug further and I looked for the actual court records because I was like, I ain't trying to repeat Megyn Kelly. Okay. So
Don't make me do it.
don't make me do it. But damn it, she's right about this one. I believe it was in a deposition or potentially it was on the stand. I don't remember. But he was asked about this. Didn't you weren't you writing a book about your abuse allegations or something like that? And his answer under oath was no, never. He said he had never talked to anybody about his alleged abuse except his own lawyers. Well, then they find out that, yes, he did. He was shopping this book, this memoir, with publishers who never picked it up, by the way. And he had 2 different drafts. So once the judge ordered a motion to compel for him to produce it, he finally did produce it, which took a long time. And when he finally did produce it, his story in draft 1 and his story in draft 2 supposedly did not match up in fairly significant ways, anyway, according to people who are talking about it. His reasons for testifying the way he did in 2005 have shifted as well. He's given more than one account of why he would have testified that way. In some instances, he said, well, I didn't realize that what I went through was actually abuse until I was in therapy in 2012 and 2013. I wanted to protect Michael Jackson's kids. I was pressured by Michael Jackson's legal team. Also, he was married, I think, for a time to like Michael Jackson's niece or something. He was married to somebody in the family. There are a lot of layers there. The lawsuit was originally filed under seal, and the estate says that he sought a quiet settlement first, which it uses against his, this has never been about the money. They're saying that's a line. So they're saying he filed it under seal and he said, I'll just take a settlement and this will go away. But then when the estate refused to pay, then he filed publicly. So they're saying, well, you can't say it was never about the money because you just asked for money. Again, this is all from the estate though. Right. This is what they're saying.
Well, I mean, if this goes to trial, we'll learn more together.
Absolutely. And there are timeline contradictions raised by biographer Mike Smallcombe from court records. So here's another thing, because I also watched Wade Robson and James Safechuck did an interview on Good Morning America maybe years ago now. And Wade Robson, as he's recalling his abuse, which, by the way, is very believable to watch. I mean, it all sounds like something you would kind of expect the sequence of events to go. But the thing that he said is, I met him when I was really little, then I didn't see him for a few years, then I met him again when I was 7, and we got to go to Neverland, and what a surreal experience this was. He's like, but we went out there, we stayed for a few days. That was a fairly normal stay, although he says he did stay in the room with Michael Jackson those few nights, but he says nothing happened then. And then he says we were set to go to the Grand Canyon on a vacation as a family for the week after that. But Michael was crying and sobbing and saying he didn't want me to leave. I didn't want to leave. This is the guy that I had looked up to. He's little, but he was like, I did everything.
Also, as a kid, Neverland seems like a super fun place. There's a freaking carnival in the front yard.
Yeah, you're like, fuck the Grand Canyon. Yeah. I don't care about that. Yeah, so he says Michael Jackson was sobbing. He was sobbing. He didn't want to leave. Michael didn't want him to leave. And he was like, please let me stay here. This is my whole life stream, whatever. So he says his parents let him stay at Neverland for the week. They go to the Grand Canyon for a week. They leave him at Neverland. And he says that's when the sexual abuse began, while they were finally alone.
Okay.
Except that Joy Robson, his mother, testified under oath many different times, but she has apparently maintained that Wade was at the Grand Canyon with the family, that he didn't stay behind at Neverland by himself. Again, I want to see how this all
Surely
comes
there's
out.
photos, right?
You would think. And I haven't seen anything about that. I haven't seen there are photos of him at the Grand Canyon during this period of time. Because this is in the 90s. And so when you take a picture, there's a timestamp.
Yes.
On the physical picture. So again, I would love to know this, but he says I didn't go to the Grand Canyon. She says, oh yes, he did.
Yeah.
I don't know. So,
We'll see.
And then Safechuck's train station abuse claims, apparently people have pulled the permitting and construction records, and the station, I guess, was like built in 93, 94, but he says all of this stuff occurred between 88 and 92 at the train station. Both of these discrepancies are contested by Wade Robson and James Safechuck, who say, no, what I am saying is correct. So again, we'll see. And there's no physical evidence across what they say is a decade plus. Again, if it doesn't come to light till later, of course there's no physical evidence, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But Tom Mesereau in 2013, when he learned that Wade Robson had been claiming this against Michael Jackson, he said, quote, Mr. Robson was one of my strongest witnesses in Michael Jackson's criminal trial. I called him to the stand at the beginning of the defense case, and he was adamant that he had never been improperly touched or molested. This makes no sense. But on NBC's Today in 2013, Wade Robson, his own explanation of that is, quote, I've never forgot one moment of what Michael did to me, but I was psychologically and emotionally completely unable and unwilling to understand that it was sexual abuse. And a lot of the things that he said were a lot of the things that the Menendez brothers talked about with their father, that I felt special because he spent that time with me. I thought that's how you showed love. He told me, this is how I show my love for you. This is how you show your love for me. I never thought at the time that it was happening that it was wrong. I thought it was special between us. So, you know, I don't know. I think, again, all of it can go both ways. And again, this is a civil case, so it's not going to be a criminal one. The bar is much lower. This is more likely than not versus reasonable doubt. So again, we will have to see how all that shakes out.
And again, I think this is going to be one of those things that comes down to credibility. And that's tough because you're relying on the memory of someone who is an adult now but was a child at the time that this happened. Time skews your memory anyway, but we know as parents that kids' timeline, I don't know what alternate universe they live in, but it is not the same 24 hours a day that I operate on. They have no point of reference for anything unless you tell them that something's going to happen at a specific time, in which case they are very aware of time and exactly how it works. And that is the only time.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I do know that some people have said, you know, about Wade Robson, well, because he's like, you know, I was younger then. I didn't really put together that what had happened with me was actual abuse and stuff like that. I believe he was 22 when he testified in the 2005 trial. And people were like, well, he was a grown adult then, like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I mean.
But he was a 22-year-old boy.
And there are a multitude of reasons why a victim of sexual abuse is going to say that it did not happen. Over and over and over and over, even if they realize it was abuse, even if they realize it was wrong, especially boys and men. Again, there's just so many reasons. I don't think that is something that proves that it definitely didn't happen.
Yeah, I agree. I will be interested to see what comes out of this case for sure.
Yeah, but the fact that he lied about the book, he was shopping a book.
Yeah.
Those are things that, like, again,
it goes against your credibility.
It doesn't. You can't do that because if a jury can't believe what you say.
Yeah.
It just,
Okay, so remember the whole briefcase magazine thing that ties Frank Cascio into this, right? The Cascio family they were among Jackson's most vocal, strongest, lifelong supporters, defenders. He's innocent, right? Well, in 2026, Edward, Dominic, and Aldo Cascio, with their sister Marie Nicole Port, filed a suit alleging that Jackson's employees facilitated and concealed the abuse, and they say that they were groomed to defend him. And the estate, again, strongly denies this. They say this is a money grab. They basically are like, look, they see all this other stuff happening. This movie's coming out. We've got this documentary that's out now. These 2 new lawsuits have been filed. Basically, they're just trying to, like, get their cut while it's hot, is the estate's argument. So
yeah.
I don't know. Does a former defender turning against an accuser make you believe them more or less? I don't know that there's a clean answer to that. And obviously that is the whole problem with this case, but we would love to hear what you guys think. So drop us a comment, let us know
Yeah.
what your thoughts are on people. I don't want to say changing their mind or changing their story, because I feel like that makes it sound very insincere.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you guys think about when people are firmly in one camp and then after some time passes allege something different?
Yeah, and I think it's one of those questions that really brings the nuance into this case and how victims of sexual abuse operate after and how they engage with the justice system and whether or not they're believed. And because it's already
Yeah.
hard, you're already not going to be believed most of the time in the first place anyway,
Mhm.
before all of this other stuff. So
Yeah.
then you're already fighting an uphill battle to be believed.
Mhm.
And then if you previously say he would never do that, I don't know what you're talking about, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, and then later it's like, well, actually that was happening the whole time. Here's my problem with fucking all of it, okay? Why are there so many staff members who, again, the estate says, well, they've all got an axe to grind. These are people who were fired for stealing. They were fired from the ranch for whatever reason. They didn't get something they wanted, something like that. So they've got an axe to grind. That's why these are the staff members coming forward saying they witnessed things.
Yeah.
What I don't understand is in the 2005 case, and then in this case as well, we are going to have staff members say that they saw sexual abuse occur between Michael Jackson and at least Wade Robson
Mhm.
on more than one occasion. Why are we witnessing things like that and we're not reporting that?
Yeah.
Why is that happening if it was in fact happening?
Mhm.
Why would you not have reported that? And they're not just saying, I thought it was kind of weird or whatever, which it is weird.
Yeah.
They're saying, I saw oral sex. Things like that.
Yeah, they're specific. And okay, they have an axe to grind, sure. They didn't say anything while they were working for you. They didn't get fired yesterday. They've been fired for a long time. So my question is, if they've just quote unquote got an axe to grind, why didn't they start grinding immediately upon being fired?
And you have to also ask the question, all right, let's talk about the circumstances of children sleeping in Michael Jackson's bed, according to virtually everybody, okay?
Uh-huh.
Michael Jackson himself says, I slept with many children. I slept with lots of children. They would sleep with me in the bed. Macaulay Culkin and his brother Kieran Culkin being some of them. Okay, the Culkins say nothing happened. Okay. However, what I don't like is, first of all, none of these are your kids.
Big red flag.
But I don't like that. Secondly, when any of the parents did also travel to Neverland with their children and the children slept in the bed with Michael, the parents were never allowed to be in his bedroom. So one of the things that Macaulay Culkin says is, it sounds like you're thinking I slept in the bedroom with Michael Jackson and you're thinking the bedroom at your house and how that would be really awkward. But he's like, Michael Jackson's bedroom was over 3,000 square feet, which is bigger than a lot of people's homes. I don't remember him saying that there were multiple rooms in it. It just seemed like a very big area.
Yeah.
3,000 square feet is a fuck ton. So,
yeah, that's a lot.
Okay. But there were rules around that, apparently, where the parents had to sleep in the guest units, which were in a different building. So, Michael Jackson's bedroom was in the main house at Neverland, and then there were guest units in a different building. So the parents weren't allowed where the kids were allowed. You got me fucked up.
Yeah, all the way.
All the
Absolutely
way.
not.
There were locks on the door to get into Michael Jackson's bedroom. And there were multiple levels that they kind of described as almost like booby traps, where it's like you would come in and one alarm would go off if you got through. And then you had to go up a bunch of stairs and then another alarm would go off if you got through that. Why would you need to do that? That is multiple levels of alerting that somebody is coming to give you time for what?
Exactly.
I would like to know what.
Also concerning to me too, though, is they're like, well, we saw these things happen after all those alarms went off. If he's got all these alarms in place and you're still catching him doing this, why are you able to catch him doing this? I guess is my question.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me. None of it makes sense. I don't like any of it. No. I'm not justifying. I'm not trying to say this couldn't have happened because all of these locks and alarms and whatever, but it also just doesn't make sense to me if he's got so many quote unquote fail safes in place to alert him that someone's coming. Well, then how are we catching him?
Yeah, and that was one of the things that the juror in the verdict mentioned, was that Starr had said he'd walked in on something, and I think it was Starr that said that.
Yeah.
And the juror was like, but how would you do that? Because there were all these alarms. Wouldn't Michael have stopped what he was doing? So they just didn't believe that he walked in on anything. I do know some of the staff members have alleged that they saw it at other places, on the Ferris wheel, in the other places too.
That I would believe. But if we're saying like I caught him in the bedroom doing blah blah blah, like, not that it doesn't happen, didn't happen, couldn't have happened. It's just like you're also giving us this whole setup of all of these things that have to happen in order to get to him in that space. And so you're telling me he's ignored all of these alarms? I don't know.
Also,
there's so much weird happening.
Yeah, and so bizarre that the alarms would be there.
Yeah,
bizarre.
That's also very concerning.
Yeah, and if you are sleeping with multiple young children in your room, look, your bedroom is your bedroom. You want to do sex shit in there, that's where you would, sure, do it there. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's your bedroom. But I certainly wouldn't be leaving out things that children could easily gain access to when I am having lots and lots of kids in that room with no adult supervision other than just me. And how are they getting in there without you there if there's all these alarms and codes and blah, blah, blah?
Yeah.
And maybe the kids all had the codes, but apparently, again, according to other staff members and according to other people, the parents were never allowed in there. They were never allowed to stay overnight there. They were never allowed to have the codes. They were never allowed, any of that. Staff members were directed many times to take the parents off site and take them shopping, or take them to fancy, expensive restaurants, or take them to this, that, or the other, so that Michael could have time alone with these children. Again, I don't know what is true and what is not. I will say, though, I don't know where I sit with it, because what are the fucking odds that this many people are saying the same thing?
Yeah, I agree. I also don't know where I sit with it, because when you watch the verdict and they destroy the credibility of all of the witnesses that showed up, you're like, I mean, that does give me reason to doubt their story.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it not true, but as far as beyond a reasonable doubt, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's so much gray area in this.
And if
there's so many concerning details.
Yeah. If you're willing to lie to file a lawsuit to get a settlement against J.C. Penney,
who does not have as much money as Michael Jackson.
Right.
It's also hard for me to understand how this many people have, like you said, the same story and an axe to grind. How many people are making this money? Like, that is also a red flag to me too. Could it be that they all colluded together and are now just building off the story? Yeah, it's possible, but it also doesn't seem likely.
And are all these staff members who are alleging this stuff, as far as I know, they're not getting paid, right? Former staff members?
I don't know.
They're not suing the estate.
No, not that I know of.
And now do they have an agreement with the people who are, that they get money if they testify? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's all disturbing. And it's also very disturbing that even after all this came out, it doesn't seem like his behavior around children stopped or changed in any way. And I don't understand that.
I don't either, because on the one hand, I'm like, are you that confident and sure of yourself that you're untouchable, that you don't feel like you need to change your behavior? Or are you genuinely convinced that you're not doing anything wrong, and so you don't feel a need to change your behavior because you're not doing anything wrong and because you've already been acquitted of these things? And so what do you have to hide? It would be more suspicious if I stopped doing, you know what I mean? Like, I can see both of those things playing out, and I don't know which is correct.
Well, and Mark Garagos did say, because he was representing him first and then he hired Tom Mesereau, and Mark Garagos did say that after the Bashir documentary came out in 2003, that Michael Jackson did still sleep in the bed with kids, and they still slept in the room with him and whatever. But he did take precautions where he said he was never alone with the kids anymore after that. There was always a third party present.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But that third
But,
party was
like-
still not the parent.
yeah, and why?
I don't know.
Just maybe just you be in your own bedroom and let them have their own bedroom. I don't.
Yeah, I agree.
I
It's creepy and I don't like it.
It's super creepy.
I also feel like Michael had a lot of childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And I feel like that colors a lot of this stuff. Doesn't make it not wrong. Doesn't mean he didn't do anything inappropriate. Doesn't mean he did do something inappropriate. But it just also is like, that's another one of those layers in this, is that his childhood was
Yeah. Very.
not
very
a childhood at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. The whole thing is very, there are just so many circumstances that are concerning.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you have a prosecutor who moved forward on, it felt like vibes. I mean, I don't know, because
Yeah.
none of his witnesses panned out at all.
Yeah.
They had very little physical evidence. The only thing they had were the fingerprints.
Mm-hmm.
There was no, that I'm aware of, bodily fluids of any
Yeah.
of the alleged victims. If all you have is the fingerprints, which sounds very damning for sure, but then when you
Yeah.
have multiple witnesses come up and say they had shoplifted, they would go through stuff all the time. We've got people saying
Yeah.
that they, I caught him doing that at my house, and like, well, then you're like, okay, well, that's kind of like,
Yeah.
I don't know. So it's just, I don't think they should have moved forward when they did. I mean, the prosecution did not do well with this case.
No, not
And-
at all.
because
I feel like
if
it was
it-
a fail for them at every single step.
At every step, because if any of what Gavin Arvizo alleged is true, they failed him.
Big time. Big,
Because
big
their
time.
case should have stood up to, okay, well, yeah, I shoplifted, or yeah, I
Yeah.
said this, and they should have had, I don't know. I
Yeah.
feel like they should have had something else. But the Wade Robson, James Safechuck suit is moving forward. That is going to happen later this year. I'm very interested to see how all of that plays out. And, again, remember that the people that this case centers around, if the allegations are true, were children at the time.
Yeah.
These are all children who say, these are the things that happened to me. And a jury did not believe some of them. Some swore
Yeah.
nothing happened and later said it did. They're all adults now. And so now they're living with whatever the truth is. And we do have, again, another verdict coming. It is a civil one. The criminal verdict that we got was not guilty. So, again, this is a case that just really, really, really lives in the gray, because these are real people. There are circumstances that lean one way. The verdict went the other way. It's just a
Yeah.
really crazy case. And that's it, you guys. That's what we've got on Michael
Yeah.
Jackson, the verdict.
It was interesting for sure. I definitely learned some stuff. So we hope you guys learned some stuff too. And we are dying to know what you guys think,
Yeah.
which way you're leaning, what you think is going to come out of this next trial. So leave us a comment and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.